In just 4 minutes, the entire Haifa Naval Base was turned into a graveyard of fire and sea. 3,000 soldiers dead. No defense system activated. No alarms sounded. And Iran, without declaring war, without a press conference, left only one message. The sea is deep, but justice runs deeper. What really happened on that fateful night?
We need more plasma over here.
Could a military superpower be brought to its knees by nothing more than belief and silence? Missiles that couldn't be detected. Was it next-gen stealth tech, or a spiritual ritual the modern world has long dismissed? In this video, we'll trace every moment, from the ignored radar anomaly to the secret pre-launch ceremony, and finally, a warning to an era that trusts weapons more than humanity. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to follow this story to its haunting end. A story the world still hesitates to speak aloud. It was 3:12 a.m. at Haifa Naval Base, northern Israel. The sea was calm. A soft Mediterranean breeze touched the steel hulls of ships resting at port. The base, home to Israel's most advanced submarines and missile boats, shimmered under dock lights. To the south, security patrols reported no movement. Barracks were quiet. Most soldiers had finished their midnight rotation and fallen asleep. A few remained awake in the command center, watching screens. One screen blinked. A radar operator at Station Echo noticed an unusual reading. Brief, low-altitude noise coming from the northwest. Not high enough to trigger alerts. Too fast for typical aircraft. The technician flagged it, but the system categorized it as signal interference. Protocol said no further action was needed. No one sounded an alarm. 3 minutes later, 3:15 a.m., 3 unidentified projectiles entered Haifa airspace. No satellites saw them. No heat signatures were detected. No sirens activated. They flew in absolute silence at speeds exceeding Mach 7. These were not standard ballistic missiles. The first impact struck the eastern fuel terminal. The second hit the command center. The third penetrated the base's underground weapons depot. Explosions followed instantly. The weapons, later identified as part of a top-secret Iranian program known as Ghadir-Tayyeh, had never been tested publicly. Intelligence sources claim they were engineered with both electromagnetic stealth and unconventional pre-launch rituals, blending technology with symbolism. Within 15 seconds, the entire naval base was in flames. A veteran radar officer later stated in debriefing, "There was no glitch. There was nothing to intercept. It was as if they came from nowhere." At exactly 3:15 a.m., the first missile tore into the eastern fuel dock. Within a fraction of a second, giant fireballs erupted. 2 fuel tankers loaded with naval diesel ignited simultaneously, their tanks bursting like overpressurized drums. The flames leapt 40 feet high, instantly engulfing the surrounding vehicles, storage facilities, and personnel. Screams echoed briefly, then silence. 12 seconds later, the second missile slammed directly into the heart of the command center. The building crumbled inward before the shockwave finished reverberating. Communications went dark. Surveillance, targeting systems, satellite uplinks, everything collapsed in one instant. No orders were issued. No coordination was possible. The third missile was the deadliest. It drilled deep into the ammunition vault beneath the central compound. There, thousands of tons of explosive ordnance were stored. The resulting chain reaction created a blast radius of nearly 500 meters. Concrete shattered. Barracks nearby imploded. Even ships docked on the far side were lifted off their moorings. By 3:19 a.m., Haifa Naval Base was no longer a base. It was a burning field of metal, smoke, and bodies. docked submarines never had a chance. One Dolphin-class nuclear-capable sub, the INS Rahav, was destroyed at port before its crew could respond. Patrol boats turned into floating pyres. The sea churned with fuel and blood. Some soldiers tried to swim. Most didn't make it far. Footage from civilian drones captured the horror in real time. Charred remains floated in oil-stained water. Mutilated bodies lay among collapsed cranes, and cranes ablaze. The coastline itself shimmered with heat. By dawn, debris and human remains had washed up on beaches over 30 kilometers away. Initial estimates put the death toll at 3,000. Revised figures reached 4,073. Naval personnel, engineers, medics, foreign contractors. Former Mossad director Y. Cohen spoke on record later that day. This wasn't just a military breach. It was the collapse of every assumption we made about deterrence. By 6:15 a.m., rescue units from Tel Aviv, Acre, and Netanya had converged on the remnants of Haifa Naval Base. But what they found wasn't a military installation. It was a flattened landscape of twisted steel, open fires, and silence. The air was thick with the stench of fuel, smoke, and scorched flesh. Field medics, overwhelmed by the scale of destruction, began treating burn victims on the asphalt. Makeshift triage zones were set up along the outer roads. Severely wounded soldiers lay in shock, some unable to speak. Others roamed aimlessly along the shoreline, barefoot, bleeding, whispering the names of friends who never responded. Some survivors were still gripping rifles, long emptied of ammunition, instinctively held as if they might still protect something. Their uniforms were burned, their faces covered in ash. The bodies recovered were largely unidentifiable. Many were missing limbs or faces. Immediate DNA identification protocols were activated. Black bags lined the access road by mid-morning. Within 24 hours, the IDF issued notification letters to over 500 families, many with no accompanying remains, only a name and location of presumed death. In Jerusalem, the defense minister appeared before press at 9:30 a.m., visibly shaken. "We are analyzing all available intelligence. This incident does not resemble a conventional act of war. It may represent something beyond our current understanding." Outrage followed. By that afternoon, thousands of citizens filled Rabin Square in Tel Aviv, chanting for resignations. Grieving parents raised photos of their lost children. "They didn't die in battle," one mother cried. "They died in their beds. And no one warned them." Across the country, grief turned into fury. And questions began to rise, louder than any official statement. In the hours following the attack, the world waited for a statement from Tehran. But none came. No official speech. No claim of responsibility. No declaration of war. Instead, a single line appeared repeatedly across verified Iranian military and governmental accounts. On Telegram, on state TV tickers, on encrypted defense channels. The sea is deep, but justice runs deeper. That was it. No explanation, no elaboration. But intelligence agencies in the region had already begun piecing together fragments from intercepted chatter. According to classified reports leaked from regional partners, the missiles that struck Haifa had been subjected to a highly unusual preparation process days before launch. Two prominent Sufi spiritual leaders, Sheikh Abdul Rauf Mahdawi and Sheikh Hizam al-Hadrami, both from a reclusive community in eastern Yemen, had reportedly performed a ritual over the warheads. The process involved a rare oil infusion made from desert herbs, black seed extract, and aged frankincense. Sources claim the compound was not chemically active, but spiritually symbolic. The warheads were anointed while verses were recited, prayers not for victory, but for divine clarity and moral reckoning. Western analysts dismissed the ritual as theater, but for Iranian hardliners and parts of the broader region, the message landed with force. This was not just an act of force, it was an act of belief. A former Iranian diplomat, speaking anonymously, offered a chilling summary. This strike was not about territory. It was a message, a reminder, that willpower and meaning, when merged, can bypass even the most advanced systems. The psychological damage, especially within Israel's defense circles, was immediate. If warfare now included the unseen, how could they prepare? By midday, less than 9 hours after the attack, the United Nations Security Council entered an emergency closed-door session. The tone was grim. Few had answers. All had questions. The United States responded immediately, placing the Sixth Fleet on maximum alert in the eastern Mediterranean and increasing drone surveillance over the Strait of Hormuz. Carrier groups in the Persian Gulf were ordered to hold position. Strategic bombers were moved closer to the region from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. In Europe, France and the United Kingdom issued joint statements condemning the attack, but warning against overreaction. This could ignite a broader war, said a UK spokesperson. Russia and China called for strategic restraint, while subtly implying that a new form of hybrid warfare may be unfolding. That phrase echoed across defense circles. Hours later, President Donald Trump delivered a national address from the White House. We mourn with Israel. We are committed to its security. But we must now ask difficult questions. Have we entered an age where belief can weaponize reality? While political leaders exchanged statements, cybersecurity firms and military analysts scrambled to analyze the data. Satellite feeds were reviewed frame by frame. Signal logs were cross-checked. The result? Nothing. There was no radar return, no electromagnetic warning, no system fault, just silence. Speculation filled the gap. Some experts suspected electromagnetic masking. Others suggested a potential security breach or insider compromise. A smaller group introduced a radical theory, cognitive warfare, where spiritual narratives and psychological manipulation are used as force multipliers alongside physical weaponry. In response, leading defense journals published urgent essays titled, "When Satellites Blink: The Spiritualization of Warfare. Can Algorithms Stop Intent?" The question no one could yet answer was simple. If this was only the beginning, what comes next? At the ruined edges of Haifa Naval Base, the sea still smoked. Along the waterfront, black body bags lined the asphalt, row after row. Medical tents overflowed. Temporary morgues were set up inside old warehouses. Some bags held entire bodies. Many did not. Others held only pieces. In a mass funeral held 48 hours later, over 3,000 soldiers were laid to rest. But many coffins were symbolic, empty, draped with flags, but void of remains. Identification teams continued their work, but salt water, fire, and metal had blurred the identities of the fallen. Grief blanketed the country, but it was not just mourning. It was confusion. Survivors returned home not only wounded, but broken. Some spoke to invisible friends. Others heard alarms that never sounded. Several were found sleepwalking, trying to report for duty in the middle of the night. The Defense Ministry quietly approved hundreds of emergency psychiatric discharges. One officer, Lieutenant Amir Golan, who was pulled from debris 6 hours after the blast, later testified to the inquiry panel. "I looked to my left. My best friend had no face. I looked to my right. My commander was kneeling, praying. I still don't know if it was for help or forgiveness. The Navy canceled all training indefinitely. New enlistments dropped 60% within 2 months. Public support for naval operations reached its lowest point since 1973. In living rooms and synagogues across the country, people no longer asked who attacked, but why? And why this way? For every name lost, 10 questions remained, and not one answer. No airstrike followed, no special operations launched, no Navy task force set sail. Israel remained silent, not from weakness, but from uncertainty. Despite holding one of the world's most advanced military arsenals, the government chose not to respond, at least not immediately. Because this time, it wasn't clear what to respond to. The attack had shattered more than infrastructure. It had shaken a foundational belief system, one built on detection, deterrence, and dominance. For decades, Israeli defense policy revolved around layered missile shields, satellite precision, and predictive AI models. All of that failed in a single, quiet night. Across military think tanks and policy rooms, a new conversation began. Can a missile carry more than explosives? Can warfare transmit belief? What happened in Haifa was not just a tactical operation, but a message encoded in fire and silence. It wasn't about conquest. It was about narrative, a challenge to the assumption that technology alone is sovereign. A senior Pentagon strategist, speaking under anonymity, said, "This is a transition point, from kinetic war to symbolic war, where precision may matter less than presence, where belief is no longer background, it's the weapon." Meanwhile, the sea remains unchanged. No headlines, no voices, just waves. But beneath the surface lies memory, uncharted, unspoken. And across the world, one uncomfortable truth lingers. We missed something. We saw no warning because we didn't believe belief could be a weapon. Important. Notice, this story is entirely a work of fiction, based on speculative scenarios and imaginative reconstruction. All characters, locations, organizations, and events mentioned are fictional and do not represent any actual individuals, governments, religious groups, or real-world incidents. This narrative is not intended to provoke, accuse, or incite hostility toward any nation, community, or belief system. The purpose of this story is educational and reflective, meant to encourage critical thinking about the complex intersections of technology, faith, warfare, and human responsibility. In a world increasingly driven by data, force, and ideology, we believe that dialogue, empathy, and a deep respect for human dignity are essential to building a more peaceful future. Because ultimately, history is not only written by what happens, but by how we choose to understand it, question it, and ensure it never repeats the same way again. If this story made you reflect, share your thoughts below and subscribe to follow more stories like this. We don't aim to provoke, but to understand. See you next time, with hope that the next global decision favors wisdom over pride.